What's up, future shredlords? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. We're going to be working on some string skipping arpeggios based around the minor pentatonic system. It's really great. But before we get into that and the examples and all the rest of that stuff, I want to talk to you guys for like 2 minutes here about the main focus of this channel. And essentially there's a split, if you will, happening on the online music teaching community. And especially with guitar, there's a lot of channels and a lot of people basically doing the use tabs and all the rest of that stuff to learn music and all the rest of that stuff. And although tabs is an incredibly useful tool and whatnot, when you're early in the game, when you get too invested into tabs, what happens is you start neglecting the actual ear training stuff, which is the real weapon of the musician, right? These are our eyes when we're playing music, and you can see that from guys like Alan Holdsworth, who are basically just destroying the fretboard with all kinds of crazy stuff, and he's just got his eyes closed. So right, like that should pretty much just, you know, lay the fallacy bare. Now listen, I'm not trying to disparage the tabs thing or anybody that does the tabs thing and stuff like that. My interest and focus is just getting the music stuff out there, because that to me is more important. And so the thrust of this channel is not necessarily to just give you scale charts and tablature and all the rest of the stuff. You're expected to go look that stuff up for yourself if you need a scale chart, like a table of chords and stuff like that and all the rest of it. But more importantly, we're going to be discussing the tools necessary to convert you from a guitar player into a musician, so that you can start to use musical principles to create music that's it comes from within, obviously from a creative place, but it's also sort of methodical and thought out, so you can take your raw sort of musical idea and make it more refined and sound even better, so you get a closer approximation, if you will, to what it was that you heard in your head based around all of the sophisticated music you've already been exposed to. So I'm going to be teaching the base principles here about something very simple like doing string skipping. We're going to start looking at these string skipped ideas as arpeggios. We're going to go through some of the basic theory on it. And then you'll see how I can then use that exercise in the theory to basically open new doors. And then, of course, there'll be 2 performances at the end where I show you the 2 sort of like tools, musically speaking, principles I use, basically the 5 of 5 and what I call the mirrored, in this case, chord or arpeggio effect. Okay, you can do it with scales too, but it's a lot more prevalent with arpeggios. And I kind of figured this one out when I was doing the 2-string stuff. So this is just another example of this thing where you have the same chord represented as 2 different things, which means you can now put them together to create one big monster thing that has a really cool and awesome sound. So I'm just putting it out there for everybody right now. We're going to be concentrating more on the music stuff. So if anybody is disappointed by that and stuff, I get it. We're still going to have scale charts. We're still going to do some tabs and stuff like that. It's going to be lots of teaching materials coming out, but I'd like to focus on giving you the tools to turn your hearing into your main weapon instead of your eyes, and so that you can be a lot more sort of intuitive on the instrument and then just reach new places and do new things, rather than feeling like you're boxed in because everything revolves around some sort of idea that you've absorbed visually, rather than sort of math out, if you will, from a auditory perspective. So we're team music on this side over here, and I wish the best for all the other guys too. But I'll tell you right now, if you don't learn these music ideas and how to apply them, music gets very boring and formulaic, and eventually you spend $20,000 on your rig and you have 4 guitars and stuff like that. They're all really killer, and you just stop playing altogether because it's not fun anymore. So that's how that works. It takes decades for you to spark to go from like very hot to basically dead. And I hate to see that, and I've seen it so many times. So that's why we're sort of working on developing our minds and our music chops together in tandem, rather than just being like, here's a shortcut. Instead, let's understand how we got here in the first place, so you can take that information and apply it to almost anything. And all of a sudden you become a musician, rather than just a guitar player enslaved to knowledge that's imparted to you. You become the fountain of knowledge. Mint, let's get into this lesson. All right, before we get into this, obviously we got to have the playing part of it. Of course, we got to go over some of the theory because that's the most important part of it. So imagine I'm sort of like I'm playing E minor pentatonic, and really, you know, E minor is not so bad because its parent key is G major, right? But imagine you're working a real nasty key like, say, F sharp minor, and you're like, well, that's A major, that's 4 sharps. Yikes, that's starting to get into some iffy territory, and you're much more likely to make mistakes and stuff like that in terms of understanding the theory. So job number one's got to be to move it from the E minor to, say, A minor. Why? Because A minor's parent scale is C major. Okay, that's the relative major, and everything you think about should be based around the major scale out. Okay, then when you get to the minor scale, you have variants like the harmonic minor and the melodic minor. So try to organize your thoughts like that. The major scale is the granddaddy of all scales, and all other scales are basically derivative of that one scale, all of them. So there it is, right? Remember, from like us basically smashing on wooden logs and stuff like that and screaming at the moon and whatnot when the fire's going on 2 million years ago, to actually developing the rules of music over several thousand years. They were little incremental discoveries. Oh, look, you can sing the root and then you can sing a fifth above and it sounds great. And then they figured out the third, and then all of a sudden it was major and minor. Then all of a sudden dominant 7 started to come into it and diminished and all that good stuff. But each one of those was like this major level music revelation. They're like, oh, really? You can do this? This is awesome. Okay, so that right there is why we have this idea that the major scale is the base of almost all music theory. And then, of course, you can start branching out into the weirder stuff after that. But if you don't understand the major scale and all the things that go with that, how to build triads, how to build dominant 7s, arpeggios, inversions, everything, the diatonic scale itself, the step pattern, and creating the major modes, you're going to be in real trouble later on when you try to do the more sophisticated stuff, and that's just a fact. Okay, so what I want to do, step one, is move like the E minor or the F sharp minor to a key that basically has no sharps or flats, which is going to be C major, which puts me at its relative minor, A minor. Okay, so that's step number one. And then what I want to do is from there, I'm like, okay, I have 7 notes in this C major scale, and I want to get C major pentatonic now. And the only difference between a pentatonic scale and a diatonic scale with 7 notes is I have to get rid of 2 notes. So I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So now I can be like, it's C, D, E, and then I jump up to 5. That's going to be the note G and then A, right? Done before I jump back to C again. And I just keep repeating that pattern. That is Music Theory 101. Let's move on to the next section. All right, all we're going to do in this section here is you can watch me, and I highly recommend that you grab the guitar and basically play along with me as best as you can to just go through these A minor pentatonic inversions, if you will, where I'm doing each set of strings. So I do the first set of strings, which is going to be the low E string moving to the D string, moving to the B string, okay? String skipping using the minor pentatonic sequence for the Ionian position, Dorian, Phrygian, then Mixolydian, and then Aeolian. In a lot of cases, I'm starting on the Mixolydian and then I move to the Aeolian position. I could have started even lower with the Phrygian, but I was like, it sounded weird and I didn't want to make it too strange, and I wanted to cover as much of the fretboard as I could. Plus, starting on one that's not the minor pentatonic can be very useful because it breaks you out of that monotony of always going to that one note, and instead now go one whole step down, and you'd be like, okay, that's awesome. So first I do it with the 6th string as the root, and then I do the exact same process where the 5th string, the A string, is the root now. So I'm playing the A string, and then I'm going to jump up, of course, to the G string, and then I'm going to jump up one more time to the high E string and do the exact same sequence. So again, I'm just still stepping through the major modes, in this case, Mixolydian, Aeolian, to the Ionian position, Dorian, then Phrygian. And then I keep going, of course, up again all the way to the Aeolian position to sort of make it feel like it ends, right? So you're going to see that. And then the first time I just do it each position and just around the 6th string, and then I do it around the 5th string. But then in the second version of it, I do it where I basically ascend and descend in each position, which is another way of practicing this exercise that's going to be incredibly useful to you. So no more yip yapping. get on these exercises. All right, now we're going to apply some basic music principles to actually how to use these arpeggios. Now, listen, we should probably go through them, and I will at the end so that people don't have to be super bored by it. And I'll probably just flash up a chart more than anything where you actually see what arpeggios you're playing and stuff like that. And I'll let you figure out how we did the 5 of 5 and whatnot. And that'll give you a little extra homework there. That way you actually have to look at this stuff and be like, all right, D7 moving to G7. So find those two shapes and then play them consecutively on the guitar. And you'll be like, there's the lick, right? That's actually you training yourself to become an amazing musician rather than me being like, go play these notes. And then you'll start doing that all the time. And it'll become part of your playing. It'll become a lick in your arsenal. And you'll be like, I love it. Job's done. Right. So in the first sequence here, obviously, what we're doing is we're starting in this A minor position. I'm jumping from the low E string, of course, to the D string and then up to the B string, right? But when I do that, I essentially get the notes A, C on the low E, right? And then on the D string, I'm going to get G, A. And then on the B string, I'm going to get the notes E, G. Now, some of those notes double up, like the note A and the note G, right? So I can combine those together and I'm just left with 4 notes, which is going to be A, C, E, G. Now listen, you may not even get them in that order. You might have them out of order, but those notes in a collection. Okay, so it's up to you to basically start to arrange them using the basic principles of how to create a triad or dominant 7 by choosing every other note in a major scale. Now, if you do not know what I meant by that, go look at some videos on how to create triads or how to play dominant 7 chords, or create them, not just play them, create them. How do you make them? Okay, there's probably 6 million videos on YouTube that'll teach you that. But you're jumping from one note to every other note in the scale. You're skipping over the one that's adjacent to it to go to the next one. So there's always 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on like that. Okay, or 2, 4, 6. Or 3, 5, 7, and keep going 4, 6, 1. That's how this process of making triads is concerned. And all I did was arrange the notes so that they followed that order. The A can go to the C because I'm jumping over B. The B or the C can then move to the E because I'm jumping over the D, right? And then of course the E can then jump over to the G because I'm skipping over the F. And if I take those together and I do the A, C, E, G, then what I get is an A minor 7 arpeggio. But I can rearrange those notes too to C, E, G, and then add the A. Okay, so now all of a sudden you have a bit of a schism. You're like, okay, I've got A minor 7, but now I have this other one, C, E, G. I know that's C major, and tack on the A, that's C major 6. That's another very popular chord. So not only have you actually done some theoretical calculations, but you've actually gained some musical understanding. Like the minor 7 and the major 6, those two things are kind of connected together. In this case, they share the same notes. I bet you anything that that's actually an axiom of music. And that's going to open a lot of doors because all of a sudden you're like, okay, major 6 and minor 7, putting those two things together. That'll start you down a path where you're starting to create solos that are just light years ahead of most people, just with that basic idea right there. And you got there from doing this simple sort of like music calculation where you're like, I took these notes. In this instance, it creates an A minor 7. In this instance, it creates a C major 6. And you're like, A and C, that's the relative minor and the relative major. So then you can extrapolate from that, of course, to be like, oh, wow, check this out. I can move that to any key now. So if I was playing E minor and G major, then E minor 7 and G major 6 go together. If I was playing F minor and A major, then it's going to be F minor 7 and A major 6. Done. Okay, so you've now basically used that to extrapolate over all 12 keys. That is incredibly useful, right? It's going to be the same basic mechanics, and all you have to do is pick your entire template up and move it to that. And you might, I don't think people realize when I say stuff like that, you might have to do that right in the middle of a chord. So it's instantaneous, and that's why training your mind to be very fast and reflexive, if you will, with respect to being able to apply these rules is what's going to make you a really killer player, right? But that's job number one right there, is starting to see that there's a symmetry. The A minor 7 and the C major 6, they exist in the same realm. This sort of weird, you know, whatever equivalency, but it's two different flavors. And then, of course, in this exercise, you're going to see me play here. You'll see how those two things blend together. I do it right at the beginning. Start off essentially with the C major 6, and then I move right into the A minor 7, and the rest is history. Right? So do the same thing for yourself. Be like, C major 6, what are those notes? C, E, G, and then A. Okay? How do I play that? And I start on the 8th fret of the low E string. You're like, oh, look, there's the G-type triad. There's 1, 3, and 5, which gives me the notes C, E, G. So all of a sudden now you've moved the cage system and you've superimposed it on top. And now you're like, if I just move up a whole step, 2 frets essentially on the D string from this arpeggio, I get the A. And you can use octaves theory for that. And again, you're starting to see how I'm taking the real world guitar hacks and using that to pair it up with the basic music theory stuff so I get faster on a regular basis with being able to do these conversions quickly and be like, there's the note C. That's the closest one I have to this A minor position where I'm at the 5th fret. I'm playing the 8th fret. And I'm like, I want to move backwards, obviously, because I want to move back towards this 5th fret from the 8th fret. So I'm going to use a G type. And that lets me build the first one right there. And then, of course, you're already in position to automatically do the A minor 7. I know it's like these two things kind of go and they just fit together. And now when you're practicing things, it's not just you mindlessly doing a bunch of A minor 7s. You're going to do that anyways. But now you have A minor 7 and C major 6 joined together. Now this opens up way more doors, and then just start applying that exact same methodology to every position. I only show it to you, obviously, in the root position at the Aeolian, but it'll happen again at Mixolydian. It'll happen again at Phrygian and Dorian and Ionian. So figure the rest of them out. Don't wait for somebody to tell you. Let's move on to the next section. I think I'm done whinging on about the theory and stuff like that. So listen, there's a chart at the end of this video that'll tell you, based on whether the root is on the 6th string, the low E, or whether it's on the 5th string, the A string there, what the arpeggio is. Okay. And you can use that information to then string these arpeggios together, not just in the sense that they're mirrored, but now using a chord progression In this case, the 5 of 5, right? So I can see at the mixolydian position, I can play a D7 variant of this arpeggio. It doesn't matter what the rest of the stuff is afterwards. I think it's D7 sus4. But the point being here is the core constituent parts of that chord is D7. And one of the other ones over at the Phrygian position, which is right next to mixolydian, is G7. Well, I know that the note D is the 5 of the key of G. And I know G is the 5 of the key of C. And you're starting to see this chain reaction happen where I can just start choosing the 5 of 5 and stuff like that. And in this case, you can keep it going if you really want to. But for our purposes, it's just those two in this case. I'm like, oh, look, there's D7, there's G7. I can now take that information and connect it together. And you're like, there's another tool. So now you have the mirror images where you're like doing essentially a minor 7 and a major 6 at the relative major. And in this case, you're being like, oh, look, I can play this arpeggio here at mixolydian and then move to this Phrygian position and resolve it using a sympathetic arpeggio, in this case, D7 moving to G7. Okay? And I would have never figured that out for myself, that these two things go together like bacon and eggs and all that good stuff. It's not just that you can do it. These things, they love each other. And so when you play them, it sounds amazing. Okay? And that's just the end of the story. Now, the last little bit is you'll notice at the last solo here also that I start adding new elements. I take this information that I have and I start to effectively migrate it into my practice sessions immediately. So you'll see me do a little sequence with dominant 7 arpeggios, and then I move to the harmonic minor scale. And then, of course, once I'm done with that, I jump into the minor pentatonic scale. And then after that, I do a sequence again using the string skipping arpeggio idea to just do a straight diatonic run, moving down. Okay, so I just move from one mode to the next, to the next, to the next, in this case, in the key of A minor, right? So, or is it? No, I think it's G major, actually. I think the backing track's in G major, but it's the same principle, same exact idea. I just moved everything from A minor up to E minor. Done, right? We showed it in A minor essentially because it's easier to figure out what these chords are that you'll see at the end. But, and that's an important step, right? Because when you do that, you can see these very easy relationships. The key of G, the key of C, those two things are like, you know, that's ebony and ivory kind of situation. It just goes together or whatever the song says. Okay, so there's that. But of course, the other thing is start to introduce this element into your practice sessions with everything else, and then try to focus on doing an opening line where you use this string skipping sort of minor pentatonic arpeggio idea that moves into some dominant 7 sequence using 6-string arpeggio inversions, right? And then of course you're going to jump over to a more exotic scale, the melodic minor, the harmonic minor. I do mine in Phrygian, and I do a combination of, Locrian, and I do a combination of the Locrian mode, that scale, the harmonic minor, and then also the G major pentatonic. So putting those three things together creates a really, really smooth and slick sounding sort of like scale that's unconventional rather than just sticking to the tried and true of any one of those ones on its own. Combining all three together, amazing. Just having one or the other is pretty good. Having two of them together can be pretty awesome too. Right? So you start to see that you have to bring these things in so it doesn't get practiced in a vacuum. Instead, it becomes part of your everyday playing. Done. Okay? So no more talk. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you. Practice hard. Practice diligently. Make sure you do it regularly, and you will achieve your goals. I promise you that. And the more you develop your mind, the better you'll get at the instrument, because you'll start to be able to hear things and then put a face to the name, and then that gets locked away in the data bank. I don't have to tell you what the word blue means. When I say that, you know automatically what it means. If I had 100 coffee cups out on a table and I said, pick all the blue ones, and they were a whole bunch of different types of coffee cups and different shades of blue, but it was obviously blue, white, and red or something like that, you would have no problem picking out all the blue ones. It doesn't matter. Even if it was a mixture of different kind of cups, you'd know which one is the coffee cup and which one is blue. Same diff with music. You need to know it's this sound based around this sort of system. Is it 3 notes per string? Is it a 6-string arpeggio? Is it a caged arpeggio? Whatever it is. But those two pieces of information go together. And now all of a sudden you have the keys to the kingdom. Right. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you have a killer Tuesday. We'll see you in the next one.